I made it to the end of my Kindle trial and your Twitter recommendations, so let's find out what happened. Hello, welcome to the Christy Grace Scarlet Pen channel. I am a creativity chaser, book lover, and author, and I am talking about part 2 for my Twitter recommendations / Kindle trial video. So first I want to share my Kindle experience with you. If you have seen any of my videos on what kind of format I prefer, you'll know ebook is my least favorite to read, and so I have been hesitant to even try Kindle up until now, but I did decide to do it to see if it would be worth it, and the short answer for that question is no. Not for me. I still don't enjoy ebooks, and it's difficult for me to read anything in an ebook format. I need the paper to focus on the words. Having a screen makes me less able to really zero in and focus on the content that I'm reading. And it's also harder for me to judge how far in the book I am, how much I have left. Knowing how many pages are left or how much of the book I've gotten through spurs me on to keep reading, so that's difficult for me anyway. I already knew all of those challenges would be there when it came to ebooks and Kindle, but it was nice to sort of have that reaffirmed. I gave it a red hot go, and so I can officially say now that I've tried it and I still don't enjoy that format. So I already knew that the format itself was going to be difficult for me, but the next step was also knowing whether Kindle subscription was worth it or not. And the answer for that also is no, not in my opinion. And here are the reasons. So with Kindle, you're paying a subscription of a certain amount of money every month, and some things are included in that subscription. So I assumed that there would be a solid selection of Kindle Unlimited or books that came included in your subscription. There's not. So the only real stuff that is Kindle Unlimited is indie stuff. It's not by huge blockbuster authors. They can afford not to have to put it into Kindle Unlimited. I feel like a lot of Kindle Unlimited is based for relatively smaller authors, or to bring hype to something that might be coming out or has come out, or something like, or to draw you in with the first one available, and then if it was like in a series, and then the other ones you have to pay for, etc. So for me, paying a subscription, it's like Audible, paying a subscription to just have access to the platform with a really limited amount that were actually available as part of your subscription is a gigantic money trap, because the stuff you actually want is not included, and you're just paying for access to download some of this stuff, and you can actually buy and purchase an ebook without having a Kindle Unlimited subscription. So for me, the actual subscription is not worth paying for, because most of what you want is not actually available. So from my Twitter recommendations, about half were available to read part of the Kindle Unlimited. So there was a mix for my Twitter recommendations, but there was one book in my recommendations which was by a best-selling author, had come out sort of relatively recently in the last year or so, and that was not available on Kindle Unlimited, and which was Project Hail Mary, which I'll talk about in a minute. But so for me, the balance of what's available in part of my subscription as opposed to what's not, and sort of what my interests lie in when it comes to books, I tend to stick with a lot of authors I know, or that have been proven and tested on other, BookTube or Goodreads reviews and things like that. And a lot of those people and those books aren't actually in Kindle Unlimited. So for me, the subscription is not worth it. If you like reading random obscure authors, or authors who are maybe a little bit smaller time, still great writing for most people, but just not necessarily what you would have picked as opposed to what you can now explore and discover, then it is a good thing. But if you're looking for more specific type of books and authors, it's not really the best option. So now that leads me to my Twitter recommended books and what I thought of them and how I went through reading those. I had about 7 books that I went through for this video, for the Twitter recommended books, one of which was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which is, a best-selling author, so that almost doesn't count. But the other books, there are a little bit of a nice balance of indie authors, which I read. across the board, most of these books were written really well. They had beautiful flow. I enjoyed most of the writing styles, and the plots were interesting. There was a pretty good mix of male-female authors and POVs that we had in male-female perspectives, and there was a bunch of different plots and ideas and stories. I had some crime, some fantasy, and all the other stuff. If you want to see exactly what I was planning to read, you can go ahead and watch the part 1 video to sort of get that idea, and I'll put links down below to all of the books that I did end up reading. But yeah, across the board, things were pretty good. I think it shouldn't have surprised me, but it surprised me at how good us indie authors really are. Like, we're really good writers, we're really good stories, we've got really great characters, but just because we don't have that machine necessarily behind us, we don't get huge exposure. But it just was really good. Some of these things were so good. There was some great stories in there. There was some historical stuff. I had some crime, some fantasy. I had you know, some royalty type things happening. There was some really cool stuff in the mix for this. Even though I really loved all of the authors that I was sort of getting into, there was a few that were a little bit more flat than others, of course, and that's just gonna happen. But I did end up having a favorite, and I'm very sad to say it was the Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So even though I love my indie authors, Project Hail Mary was so good. And yes, I cheated. So I was supposed to be doing all of this with Kindle, and then when I looked at Project Hail Mary, I discovered that it was only an extra $2 or $3 to get the paperback version of this book. And so for me, instead of paying $13 for an ebook, which was unbelievably expensive for an ebook, and I could just spend $16 to get the paperback, I was like, nah bro, like I ended up with the paperback. So I did cheat a little bit, and I'm so glad that I cheated. Because honestly, this book was so good. I was genuinely surprised at how funny this book was. I hadn't read The Martian. I think I might have seen the movie, but I couldn't really remember it much. I had never read the book, and I am going to be now. Project Hail Mary was so funny, and it was so great, because even though it's a proper sci-fi, like there's a lot of science in here, it's actually done in a way that I, someone who doesn't do science, could digest really well and easily. And yes, I had to skip over some of the more technically sciencey stuff, but I didn't mind because the rest of it was so well written and so beautiful. And so even though this was a freaking long book, well, this is a really long book for me, it was so worth it. I think I read it in a matter of days, which is good for me. I don't read books in one day. I can't focus that long, not normally, but it was just so good, and it was so well written. So I'm a little bit disappointed, to be perfectly honest, that my favorite one was the best-selling author, because some of the other authors in this and the stories were also really good. Again, I'll put links to all of the books that I read in the description below, so if you wanted to check them out, you can. If you want to know a little bit more about them, check out part 1 video where I went over all of the ones I was planning to read. But they were really great. I'm so glad I ended up finding some of these authors and stories that I wouldn't have before. I think that the writing and reading Twitter community is great. We love to share stuff, especially our stuff. So it was really good to have that engagement from my lovely Twitter community, and I would encourage you, if you are a reader/writer, go to Twitter and check that out. You can check my Twitter out if you want. I'll probably put the link below. But otherwise, check out this community because it's really great to support each other and to have this sort of engagement in here. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, hit the like button, and you can subscribe if you like or not. It doesn't really matter. I'll see you guys in the adventures.